I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Yuwut and Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be watching today's episode.
The main overarching problem in Australia is that most people don't eat enough dietary fibre to start with. We really are starting to understand that the bacteria and us are so intricately linked. And as humans, we love to get caught up in the little details of the ingredient lists on ultra-processed foods, but it's the big picture that matters.
Welcome to Shit Sparked, the podcast that gets real about addiction, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Paris, and I spent 17 years battling the bottle, 10 years hooked on meth, and I also did a stint in the escorting world, which nearly cost me everything, including my life. With both lived and professional experience, including qualifications in alcohol and other drugs, I'm here to share what I've learned along the way. Every journey's unique, and this podcast brings you stories, insights, and practical tools to help you find what works for you. Now, just a disclaimer, we dive into some tough topics here, including addiction, all forms of abuse, trauma, mental illness, suicide, self-harm, and the realities of life in recovery. These discussions can be intense, so please take care while listening and just make sure you're in the right headspace too. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast. Your support actually helps us more than you know, and it's one of the best ways to keep these conversations going. I hope you enjoy the show. And welcome to the show, Dr. Angela Genoni. Thank you so much for coming. Well, Angela is actually streaming in from Perth, WA. So lately, I actually haven't had a lot of WA guest speakers on. So it's always really nice to have someone in my time zone. It definitely makes it a lot easier to pick suitable times to record.
Absolutely. And then we can talk about how lovely the weather is today.
Oh my goodness, so good, right? Because we're in what? We're in May, right? And this is autumn, isn't it?
It is. And it's like so warm today. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And are you originally from Perth?
I am, although I grew up in the country. I'm a Kalgoorlie girl at heart. Spent most of my childhood in Kalgoorlie. So, yeah, I've got that little bit of bogan inside of me.
Don't we all? I love that. I actually quite like Cal. Hey, like I don't mind it. It's got a lot of character.
Yeah, I must admit I have not been back for a long time. I keep threatening the kids to take them there for a bit of a show and tell, but we haven't done it.
Oh, that'd be fun though. It's a bit different though. A bit different to Perth. Oh, well, all right. We'll dive straight on into things. So would you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your company?
Sure. So I'm a nutritionist by training, and I did my undergraduate degree like quite a long time ago. But, I had a lot of experience working in the nutrition field and in the food industry after I finished my undergrad. But when I had my children, I stayed home with them for a few years, and I was kind of looking for a flexible way to get back into the workforce. And I came up with this idea of doing a PhD. And to do the PhD, I had to do an honours degree first and then did my PhD. And that's kind of led me to where I am now, where I've created kind of what I've learned in my PhD and also my journey as a parent and now as a single parent, and wrapped that all up together in my business. And that is kind of communicating science with compassion and helping people rediscover their love of their body again by helping them understand how their gut works and, finding that joy in what their body can do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. It's so fascinating. I honestly have been so excited for this conversation because I think you're going to have so much knowledge and insight into things that even I don't have a lot of understanding of. And I feel like a lot of people don't really understand how our gut works.
I totally agree. I think for many of us, like, when was the last time you learned about the digestive system? Was it in
Oh,
primary
primary
school
school.
or high school? And how much of that do we actually remember? And it's like, probably not a
Nothing.
lot. And if honestly, if we could see what's happening in there, then we would all love ourselves just that little bit more. And I want to help people have that joy again of going, wow, that is amazing. Like, our body is incredible. And, really that builds self-confidence from the inside out.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's something that I have always struggled with as well. Like, I mean, I had an eating disorder from, I think I was like 18 to, I think I was 24, but then I was also in active addiction around that time as well. So I was very much on the low weight range for a long
Yeah.
time. And I ended up getting put on some antipsychotics a couple of years ago, and that just changed my body drastically. I am like the biggest now that I have ever been. And I think I need to educate myself a little bit more around how my body works so I can help it heal again. So, yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, cool. I hope that we can help you and your listeners into having some of that wonder back again.
Yes, thank you. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the world of nutrition and the gut microbiome, and what led you to focus on this particular area of health?
My journey into nutrition was also not quite straightforward, because when I finished high school, I thought I had got quite good scores in my now called ATAR, but it was TEE back in my day. And um, when I finished school, we were encouraged to go to uni to do things that we were good at, not necessarily things that we enjoyed. So I enrolled in engineering. And when I got to uni, I quickly decided that actually I didn't really like maths after all. And so I withdrew, and I spent a couple of years just working in sort of admin jobs, trying to find my way and find what did spark my passion. And it was kind of when I was living at large in Sydney that I got interested in nutrition and read lots of books. And then I thought, right, I'm going back to study nutrition. And so that was when I went back in my 20s to do my undergraduate degree. I've always loved the science of nutrition. Like, it is quite a new science. There's still a lot to learn and uncover about various aspects of nutrition. And I find that really exciting, because we don't know everything, and scientists are well aware of, we're well aware of the limitations of our knowledge, and it is pretty cool to keep exploring that. And for my PhD, I kind of fell into the gut health area, and I did have reservations about it. And isn't it funny where life takes you sometimes? You make one small decision and it ends up cascading the whole journey of your life. I did my honours degree, I put some women on a dietary intervention, and during that intervention, quite a few of the women had gut problems. And so my supervisor at the time said, oh, why don't you look at this in more detail for your PhD? And I must admit, I was really apprehensive about doing that, because I kind of knew that if I was going to look at the gut for my PhD, that I would be spending a year in the lab with poo samples. And I was a bit like, I don't know about that. But
Fair.
yes, fair. But having said that, I did also have 3 small children at home. So I was kind of desensitized to the whole bodily excrements. If you've got kids, you know what I mean. So I just kind of embraced it and said, yeah, okay, what the heck, I'll do it. And yeah, funny, because it was the best experience of my life. The lab work was the most fun thing I've ever done. I got to sequence all the DNA from all the samples I collected. I did all the analysis. Like, I just loved every minute of it. And I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had the chance. And also funny, like, I met my now partner because we worked together on that project. So it was just like one of those things where life took me on a journey where I was meant to be.
It is funny how life takes
Yeah.
us on these types of pathways. I mean, I wasn't expecting to become an addict and now be working in this space, like, helping other people heal. But life takes us some funny places, hey.
Yes, and perhaps that's where you were meant to be all along, was just helping people. And that's fantastic that you've ended up there eventually.
Oh, absolutely. I often say to people, if I look back on the day that I actually chose to walk that path and I made that decision that really was the catalyst of going into active addiction, I honestly don't think it would have gone any other way. It was like I was meant to walk that path. So I really believe that. I really believe we're meant to walk these paths. So
I'm so with you there, because all of the things that I've also done too, like if I could go back and change them, would I? No, actually, they shape you in a way that you can't, or you don't want to go and undo, because you are who you are because of those things. And it's actually quite fantastic to be out the other side and realize that and reflect on it.
yeah, I actually was asked that in an interview the other day. They're like, considering all the things you went through, is there anything that you'd take back? And I was like, do I
Mm,
feel a lot of it was necessary? Not really, but
yeah,
I also feel like it's built me to where I am, my character, everything about me, and I
yeah.
just wouldn't be who I am today without those experiences. So no,
Yep, I
I wouldn't.
totally agree. I think I just really feel that having the science is one thing, but there's a lot of people out there that communicate the science in a very extreme way or quite harsh about it. And
Yes.
I really feel we need to put more love and kindness and empathy into
Mm,
my type of area, and that's what I want to be doing. And so yeah, I'm
absolutely.
grateful for all of the things too that I've been through to get me here.
Yeah, and I think it's so valuable because I also feel there's a lot of misinformation out
Yeah.
there around these topics, and I get confused. I try to learn about things. I'm like, is that true? Is that not true? I don't know anymore. Like, what's real? What's AI? I have no clue.
I know. It's so hard, isn't it? And, I can completely understand why people are confused, because, yeah, people say different things all the time. And if you can have some knowledge yourself to be able to that out, like that is key empowerment for you, because then you can look at something and go, okay, no, I don't need that, because you know yourself. And that's the confidence level we want to get people to.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that we can, at least
Yeah.
start to get some of those feelings by the end of this episode. So, how would you explain the role of the gut? Am I saying microbiome right? Is
Yep.
that right?
Yep.
Microbiome. Yep. And overall wellness to someone who's just starting to explore it. So, me, who doesn't really understand.
And I think a lot of people don't really see the connection between the gut and basically every other system in your body. So,
Yeah.
in your digestive tract, in your colon, there's more bacterial cells than there are cells in our entire human body. So that just puts into perspective the sheer number of good guys that we're dealing with here. And in the past, science really dismissed the role of those bacteria in there as just like passengers. But as we learn more, and as we continue to learn more now, because it's like a very emerging science, we really are starting to understand that the bacteria and us are so intricately linked that they can impact every organ system, from our bones and our bone density to the way we tolerate exercise, to our mood, to our sleep, our productivity with our work, our risk of cardiovascular disease. There's so many things that our gut and our body are linked, and we need to appreciate that a little bit more when we're sort of thinking about how we look after ourselves.
Yeah. And so, with that bacteria, is that what we call the microbiome?
Yeah, so that collection, and there's not just bacteria in there. Actually, I should be more correct. There's bacteria, there's viruses, there's fungi, there's archaea. There's a whole community. It's like a rainforest. And in my program, I talk to people about how it is a rainforest. It's like the Amazon rainforest in your colon. And it's an intricately balanced environment of many,
Mm.
many types of species of bacteria in there. And primarily we look at bacteria because they're the main guys in there. But there's over 1,000 different species in there. And each one of those bacterial species likes to munch on different food products. So the more variety we can give them to eat, the better off we are in terms of what they can do for us. And the way that they help us is so they get to eat our leftovers. So when food passes into our small intestine, so we eat, it goes into our stomach and then into our small intestine. Now, the small intestine is where our human cells get to work. So they will take up everything that our own body cells need for function. So that's where we would use our carbohydrates and our protein and our fat and so on. But a proportion of that is not digested. So the human body is not 100% efficient at absorbing everything. So a portion of everything that we eat will pass through to the colon. And the colon is like the compost bin of our body. That's where the bacteria live. That's what we call the gut microbiome. And that's where they get to work doing their job, breaking all those leftovers down so we don't have to spend the whole day on the toilet.
Yeah, I mean, okay. There's like a lot to learn just in that in that small bit that you've explained. I mean, my head was like, oh, I'm keen to get further into this. So, when people come to you with food like sensitivities or digestive issues, what's often the first thing that you look at in terms of their gut health?
So the first thing that we do is look at the types of fibre that people are eating. So when you hear the word dietary fibre, you might think that it's just one compound in food. But the reality is it's like several hundred different types of compounds that all fall under that definition of fibre. So some people can have intolerances to fibre from apples but not from bananas or something similar like that. So we need to work out, how much fibre they are eating, where's it coming from, have they got anything that they're not coping with? And then if that's the case, we sort of try and remove that for a little while and build up the other fibres in the background to try and build up the strength of those gut bacteria. And then we can try reintroducing things again. And often the sensitivities can be overcome when the bacteria and the health of the colon is not in such an inflamed state.
Right, because that I didn't realize that you could overcome like certain sensitivities. Like, would that be the same for if someone was like lactose intolerant? They could overcome that.
That can be a tricky one because lactose intolerance can be genetic as well, because we
Right.
need, so that's kind of a separate issue, and this is where it can get very confusing because some food intolerances are from things like IBS type, where it's just a specific fibre that's not going so well, or some can be, more biochemical or genetic related to your specific body, and that's where you need a bit more individual support to overcome those. But the main overarching problem in Australia is that most people don't eat enough dietary fibre to start with. So what can happen then if the gut bacteria don't have enough to eat? They'll gobble up whatever it is they can find to eat. And sometimes that's our mucus layer that's lining our colon, which they're not meant to be eating that. And so what can happen then is you end up with things like leaky gut. So you might have heard of that. And
Yes, I have.
that's where your barrier function in your colon is compromised, and little particles of fragments of food or bacterial particles can make their way into the bloodstream, and that triggers a cascade of inflammation or systemic inflammation. And that can be sometimes quite easily fixed by increasing fibre intake to support the populations of bacteria, and then that naturally can rebuild the mucus layer. And that can fix food sensitivities quite quickly in some people, but in some people it's a lot more complicated and there's other things going on. So I don't like to put it in a bucket and say, yes, it's easy to fix, because it is quite individual.
Yeah, of course, of course. Okay, so like for someone like myself, like who does have, or I'm suspicious of maybe having leaky gut. Like I just
Yeah.
have a lot of tummy issues. What would you suggest to someone in regards to balancing those fibers? Like how does one do that?
So the first thing we do is I get people to track their food intake for a day or two. And I don't think tracking calories is particularly helpful for people long term, but
Mm-hmm.
for the purpose of just checking for fiber intake, it can be very useful. So you track your intake for a couple of days and we just be accountable with ourselves. How much fiber are we actually eating? And then we look at where's it coming from. So if it's only coming from fruits and vegetables, then we look at diversifying your fiber intake to give you some different types of fiber from other sources. And that can help balance out your fiber ratios to support different populations of bacteria and help balance things out properly.
Right. So the goal is to have different varieties of fibers from different types of foods, to then create some type of union.
Exactly. Yeah, because
Yeah.
the healthiest gut is the one where you have a really big range of bacterial populations. So diverse microbiomes are the healthiest microbiomes. And we know in many different health conditions, like from obesity to cardiovascular disease to dementia, pretty much everything, we see populations or diversity of the gut microbiome is reduced. Now, whether that's a cause or a consequence, it's unclear.
Yeah.
But what is clear is if we have a diverse microbiome to start with, we're more likely to stay healthy.
That's so
So,
interesting.
yeah, so feeding your gut a diverse range of fibers makes sure that the bacteria are getting fed properly. So you can think of your bacteria. Have you got a cat? Or I'm sure some of your listeners have got cats.
Yeah, I'm sure they
Um,
do.
so you know how cats are really fussy, right? They only eat, they've got a favourite food, and if you try and change their food, they get really cross with you and they won't eat dinner.
Yes, I have heard they do
Yeah,
that.
but they will eat if they're starving. So if they get to the point where they're hungry, they will eat that alternate food source. And your bacteria are quite similar to that. Like they do have their favorite food source, but they do also have alternate food sources if they're hungry enough to eat those. So that's why we want to have a wide range of fiber intakes, because that really means that we're supporting the most number of beneficial bacteria in there as we possibly can.
I keep picturing like this little village like in my gut.
Yeah, it is very much so. It is a village in there. Honestly, if we could see in there of what they do, it would be super cool.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly, it's fascinating. So I
Yeah.
actually wanted to ask, how do environmental factors like stress or
Mm.
lifestyle habits impact the gut microbiome? And how can people improve their gut health through lifestyle changes?
So this is one that a lot of influencers kind of forget about. They push the supplements without thinking about the importance of this stuff, because if you are on a diet but you're so stressed about making sure you're eating the right things, then your gut brain axis is working overtime in the wrong direction, and you might end up feeling like your gut is worse. So the stress cannot be underestimated here. And I think although diet is the biggest driver of microbiome composition, the effect of stress and exercise and nature exposure are also really, really big. So when our gut connects to our brain, there's also neurons that go back the other way as well. So, when you get a bit stressed, you might get diarrhea or something along those lines.
Oh, yep,
That's
yep, been there.
that's yeah, that's your brain talking to your gut. And so the brain is saying, hey, we're a bit stressed. And so the brain thinks, oh, maybe you ate something bad, let's get rid of it. And so it speeds up all the muscle contractions in your digestive system to try and expel whatever it was that you might be
Interesting.
in there. So it's evolved to be a protective mechanism to keep us safe. But when we have chronic stress, it can really just fire things up in a way that's not comfortable for a long time, and the neurons become hypersensitive and things get out of balance quickly, because if things are moving through too quickly, then our microbiome population can be detrimentally affected by that. Now we'll move on to exercise, because exercise, although you're not changing the food that you're giving your gut bacteria when you do exercise, in a really cool turn of events, the blood flow to the colon changes when we exercise. So if you think about what happens when we exercise, we putting blood into our muscles. So when we do that, that takes blood away from the digestive tract. And it also means we've got metabolites from the muscles, like increased lactic acid and so on, coming from the muscles that are in the bloodstream. And those two things combined can really have a positive effect on the gut microbiome all by itself, which is, I think, really, really amazing. So if you need a bit of motivation to just do something active, then that is a good one, because if you're struggling with your gut, adding in a bit of exercise can actually be a game changer for some people.
Yeah, and I can imagine for a lot of people as well, we sit down well more often than
Yeah,
what we used to. And so I can imagine that's probably quite a common
yes.
denominator that people are dealing with.
Yes, absolutely. And that the nerve endings in the digestive tract, although they're not touching the bacteria, they can sense what's going on in there. And it's really clever the way the body has communicates that signal back to the brain. So your feel good hormones mostly originate from the gut, and so does your melatonin from your sleep as well. So that intricate connection is really helpful for just helping you feel better, just generally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you as well, like with the rise of ultra processed foods, I mean, what is nutrition these days? How are these affecting our gut health, and what should we be aware of when it comes to food choices?
Now, this is a really tricky area because, on one hand, we get told don't eat ultra processed foods, they're really harmful for us. But on the other hand, we have manufacturers putting stuff out like almost daily with a health claim on it. And so if we eat that food, it goes into our head, or we record it in our head, oh no, that was a health food. And so there's this really fine line about, well, what actually counts as an ultra processed food and what
Mm.
is a harmful, like ultra processed food. And it can be really confusing to try and navigate that, because on the negative side of ultra processed foods, you've got, when they process those foods, most of the fiber has been removed. So that's the first thing. And then you've got added fats or saturated fats, which are not great. And you've got lots of fat, salt and sugar as well. So, and also the other ingredients, the additives and preservatives, and we know some of those can disrupt the microbiome as well. So we've got this whole suite of reasons why those foods can muck up our gut microbiome. But then you have that kind of processing combined with one additive in it, which has got a positive effect. And so people get confused about whether or not they should actually be eating that.
Yeah, and I can understand as well that, there's a lot of false marketing on certain
Mm,
things. Like I know you see a lot of those like light like cream cheese or light something, and then it's often got more sugar in it, or, because it might be reduced fat, but then something else has gone up. And I just found, even for myself, like I've started to learn a little bit more about what ingredients to kind of look out for when looking at processed foods, and just kind of being a bit more mindful of what is in these
yeah.
products, instead of just relying what's on the package. Like even if it says, like, I think I was drinking an Up and Go the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, 5-star, health rating. I was like, that's weird. Why would that be a 5-star health rating? And then I was looking at the ingredients. I was like, there's no way that this would be a 5-star health rating. I was like, well, how did this
Yeah.
get a 5-star health rating?
Oh, there's many of us in the nutrition space which are not we're not really fans of the health star rating, because you've got some foods that are actually whole foods, but because they've got extra fat in them, like natural yogurt, they're only given like a 1 or a 2-star rating when they're actually an unprocessed whole food. So I don't usually go by the star ratings either, because exactly what you're just saying, they can be manipulated a bit with the ingredient list, and it's still an ultra processed food.
All right, listen up, legends. If you're looking to experience the real Western Australia, there's no better way than with Why Not Bus, who is one of our sponsors. I've actually been on their tour, and let me tell you, it is awesome vibes, epic adventures, and I made lifelong friends. We're talking snorkeling with sea lions, manta rays, whale sharks, camping under the stars, and taking your time to enjoy the beauty of WA. Use my discount code PARIS2025 and get $300 off your next tour. Go to www.whynotbus.com.au. I was actually watching a documentary, it was probably a couple of months ago now, and I found this really interesting. This was when I first started to learn a little bit about microbiomes, and it was a doco on Netflix. I don't know if you saw it. Bloody heck, what was it called?
Was it called is Hack Your Health? Is it the gut one?
Yes, it was that one. Yeah, I found that really interesting, and I thought that was a good starting point for me to just kind of understand a little bit more about it, and especially looking at how in different areas of the world people have very different microbiomes. So like people who live in more like urban, city areas compared to those that live like in rural places, they have such differences in their microbiome. Like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, the first is their diet is different. So you've got like there's been a lot of studies in rural Africa, for example, where we know that they eat mostly unprocessed foods, very high fiber. But then you can't discount the environmental differences there as well. They haven't got the pollution, they haven't got the dense urban living environments with apartments. They're living out more in nature, and also the social aspect of the communities. They might prepare food together, they eat together, they do activities together, they live together. Whereas we're very individualist, our societies, and so we might go to work and come home in a house and not really see many other people during the day. So those types of social aspects can't be discounted either, because we share bacteria with people that we're around without really realising it. So those things can influence our gut too.
That's really fascinating. So even like our circle around us can
Yes.
influence our health and well-being.
Absolutely. And I've put a chapter in my book about this too, because I think it
Go
is
on,
really
tell us.
it's really fascinating, because people in rural China who were really long living centenarians, they have more youthful microbiomes, and it's thought that it's just because they're around younger people basically their whole day, and so they're sharing microbiome with their peers and family on a constant basis, and so it shapes their own microbiome to be a bit younger.
That's fascinating. My goodness, I'm learning so much today.
Yeah, it's really cool. The science is, we just know so little right now, and it just makes it really exciting, when I see a new paper and I'm just like, oh wow, that's fascinating, and then you want to know more, but we don't actually know all the stuff
Everything
that
just
we could
yet.
know
Yeah.
yet. But I think
Yeah.
the big picture message is that it all fits together in a way that we need to have more mindfulness too. Like, we can't pick out one individual thing. It's the big picture. It's putting it all together that matters the most. And as humans, we love to get caught up in the little details of the ingredient lists on ultra processed foods, but it's the big picture that matters, and we can't forget that bit.
Yeah, I mean it's important. I mean, I guess I haven't really been thinking about it in that aspect, even though because I work in like mental health and addiction and even the way that I've set up my business that I'm launching, I'm not looking at the presenting issue. I'm looking at all the modalities that make up that person's life and their overall well-being. And I can imagine, yeah, it would be the same with your own gut health as well. Like you really do need to look at the bigger picture. Like for someone's entire well-being, their overall well-being, we've got so many different pillars that we need to be looking at, and we don't do that. Like not in Western medicine, we don't do that. Like in psychology, we don't. It's like we're so segregated in even the way that we treat a lot of things or try to manage certain things. We don't often look at the whole picture. So maybe we need to start doing that with everything.
I think we do need to have a bit more mindfulness to, being so specific with our advice sometimes is very helpful, and it's needed, but also you need to have the the compassion for that person to understand how is that actually going to impact their life? Is it achievable for them to do that? So if you're telling them to cut out, an ultra processed food, for an example, but they only eat it once a fortnight and they eat it with their friends, like, those are the types of contextual discussions that, does it matter in the context of your overall diet if
Yeah.
you eat those things once or twice a fortnight? And I think, I'm very big on helping people know the details because that empowers you, but then you have to step back and say, okay, let's just keep it real here. I've got to also keep my stress levels down and do some exercise and be out in nature. So is it worth worrying about that so much? Probably not.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. I like it. Well, I wanted to also ask and talk a little bit more about this, but the gut is often, referred to as the second brain. So,
Mhm.
how does the health of your gut influence your mental well-being? And are there any specific gut issues that can be linked to mood or cognitive function?
This is a very interesting area, and you don't even need to be having any gut issues to notice that you feel better when you start eating a bit better. So, when you eat fiber, and we talked about fiber before, but if you eat more fiber, then as the bacteria consume that fiber, they produce these little compounds called short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids help the health of the colon, but they also travel far and wide in our body to reduce inflammation. And one of the ways they reduce inflammation is to improve the way we process things mentally. So they can really help our mood and the way we feel, in addition to the feel good hormones that might be produced simply by increasing the fiber in our diet. So there's a couple of different ways that eating more fiber can improve mood. And it's been shown in many different studies that the more of a healthy dietary pattern you follow, the less risk you have of developing conditions like depression and anxiety. But so that goes that way. But going the other way, if you already have diagnosed conditions, then it can improve the management in conjunction with your other therapies.
Yeah. So looking at not just getting maybe therapy with a psychologist to help your mental state, but looking at what's going on with your physical health as well to
Yeah,
then support your mental health.
absolutely. Yeah. So it's sort of like, it's not telling people, oh, you can fix it with diet. No, no, you've got to do all the things to get you feeling better. And in fact, the therapy and the medication might be where you get started. And then once you're feeling a bit better, you can move on to some of the diet and lifestyle
Mm.
factors to support that. And then eventually, because it goes around in a circle, the more dietary lifestyle factors you can improve, the better you feel, and then the more you can do. And then, you can continually go on an upward spiral of improving
Mm.
all of the things with just a few small steps.
So do you have much knowledge around this? Is just like popped up in my head at the moment, but do you have much knowledge around, I guess, even the impacts of like medication on the gut, like particularly mental health medication?
This is a really interesting area because when a lot of tests, when they develop new drugs, they test them for safety and they often use animal models and then human studies and so on to check that the drugs are safe. The gut microbiome hasn't traditionally been included in those tests when we might be looking at developing a new drug. I think science is starting to understand that it does need to be considered when we're putting a new drug on the market. How does it affect the gut microbiome? I know some of the antidepressant medications can give people quite significant gastrointestinal symptoms, and that can be something that might stop people wanting to take them, for example, if they're getting nausea or constipation from taking the medication. So the answer to that is yes, many of them can have quite significant effects in the gut, and individual drugs can have different effects. We would need to structure the diet around that to try and mitigate some of those things. So if it's constipation that the drug's causing, then perhaps we can increase fibre from specific food sources to try and combat that a little bit, to try and offset some of those symptoms. And that's where some more individual advice is recommended.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know just like from my own experience, I shared just a little bit earlier when we first started chatting, was that when I got onto these antipsychotics, like I'm still on antidepressants now, but particularly when I was on the antipsychotics like quetiapine,
Mm,
that was gnarly on my body. And I just
mm.
gained so much weight, even though my diet didn't change. And I just haven't been able to shake it since, even though I'm off it now. It's
Isn't
just
that
totally changed things.
it's amazing, and look, a lot of that is probably mediated via the gut, and
Yeah.
I don't think science has a full understanding of the significance of some of those things. You know, in the short term, they're helping the patients and they're saving lives,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
in the longer term, what can we do to offset some of those? Maybe it's going to be a case of specific probiotics being prescribed with drugs to try and
Alongside it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Would make sense, wouldn't it? Yeah, because like I mean, it's not like anyone spoke to me about my nutrition or anything
Yeah,
like that when I was given these medications. Like nothing. No exercise talk, no nada.
yeah. I think the gut microbiome effects may not have even been. I haven't checked the literature. There's probably some research on the gut for that specific medication,
Okay.
but that for others there won't be. But they'll have on the on the patient sheet that it might cause gastrointestinal effects. But in terms of the bacterial composition inside your gut, we don't really know.
It's not really looked at. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not in a big detail, but I think that's like a really big area of research. And I think as new drugs are put on the market, including microbiome testing in their reporting will be like just what they have to do because we need to understand the impact of those things.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's fascinating. I didn't realize, obviously we weren't looking at a lot of these things when producing medications, but I don't know why I thought we would be.
Yeah, it's like when we put preservatives in food. Like we put preservatives in food to keep the food safe, right? And the
Yes.
preservatives kill bacteria. That's their job, and it means we can eat the food when we don't die. But it also means that when they get to our gut, they probably still have that effect in the gut. So, some things have been put out without stopping to consider what the effect is on the gut microbiome. And yeah, we need to backpedal a bit sometimes and go back and revisit. Now that we've got new technology that can examine it in a lot more detail and be a lot more accurate with our interpretation, we can go back and look at these things a bit better.
Yeah, I think we've got a few things we need to backpedal on.
Yeah, we've made a big list here, haven't we?
Yeah, add it to the list. Go on. Oh, so in regards to like different varieties of fiber, like can you give me some examples of what that could look like in regards to like different foods?
Yeah, so Fruits and vegetables, for example, have quite high amounts of cellulose, and cellulose is the cell walls of all the fruits and the vegetables. And your nana, or my nana, used to call that sort of stuff roughage. It's what you might think of like what bran is from, like wheat bran. That's also cellulose. So that's kind of the major constituent of fruits and vegetables. But then you've got other things in the fruits and vegetables as well, like oranges, for example, are quite high in pectin. And pectin is a soluble fibre, and that's what we use, or that's how jam sets when we make jam. It sets because it's got pectin in it. But bacteria love pectin, so it's a beneficial, one of the beneficial parts of eating fruit and vegetables is we get lots of different types of fibres from the fruit and the vegetables. So cellulose and pectins, for example, are one of them. And then if we were to look at things like grains and whole grains, then we would get more of, if we eat the whole grain, we would get some cellulose from the husks of the grain, but we would also get things like resistant starch. So resistant starch is like a starch, so a carbohydrate, but it's so long and complex that we can't absorb it in the small intestine, and so it becomes food for the bacteria when it gets to the colon. And resistant starch is probably one of the most beneficial types of dietary fibre to eat for your gut bacteria, because it produces really high amounts of those short-chain fatty acids that we were talking about earlier. So very beneficial for producing, those anti-inflammatory compounds after you consume it. So things like oats and whole grains and legumes are quite high in resistant starch. And then we've got the other types of fibres, which are very short compounds called FODMAPs. And if any of your listeners got IBS or something along those lines, they're probably already familiar with the term FODMAPs, but they're very short chain fibres and they're fermented very rapidly once they get to the colon, and that can cause a bit of pain and discomfort for some people. But they're quite high in things like legumes as well. So legumes have resistant starch, but they also have different FODMAPs in them. We also find some FODMAPs in some fruits and vegetables as well. So some people might notice that some fruits and vegetables don't sit so well in their tummy, and that's probably why. And I think I've just about covered the major ones. There's lots of like sub-compounds with lots of different fancy sounding chemical names. But the more variety and colour you can consume from fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, the better your gut microbiome will be.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And what would your thoughts be on, I guess, like meats and dairy? Like how is that fitting in with our microbiomes?
That's a good question. So this is a very tricky area because there's quite a bit of research out now showing that for optimal health, our protein requirements might be a little bit higher than what nutrition has considered optimal in the past. But on the flip side to that, we know that having too much animal protein entering our colon is not beneficial, because red and processed meats, when they get to the colon, and there is going to be a proportion of everything you eat end up in the colon, remember. So everything that is left over from eating red and processed meats does end up in the colon, and red and processed meats and saturated fats produce less desirable metabolites as the bacteria consume those, and those are the things that are associated with things like colorectal cancer and heart disease. So this is a tricky area because you need to eat enough to get enough protein. We need to structure our diet to get enough protein, but we also don't want too much animal protein ending up in the colon. So the best piece of advice there is to vary your protein sources. So, having some dairy, some animal protein, and sticking to more of the white meats like chicken or fish. And then also including plant proteins as well, like legumes are a fantastic source of protein, but they also have the fibres in them as well. So you can tick a few boxes when you're consuming legumes. So mixing up the protein sources really makes sure that you're not ending up with too much of that animal protein in the colon, which is not the desirable place for it to be.
Amazing. Thanks so much for clearing that up for me. Because I think that's always been something that I've often wondered, because I never always feel good having animal products. I know for me, well, I'm lactose intolerant, so I definitely
Yeah.
don't feel good from dairy. But even red meats, I'm not really a big fan of. I never feel good like after I eat them. I don't mind chicken. I love fish,
Mm.
But even chicken, I'm a bit. But I
And
don't know.
and that's where we can, getting people to look at what their preferences are and just structuring your diet around what it is you like and what you can do. Because if you know, this is the reason that I don't like, meal plans and so on, because, what I like is different from what you like. And, it's not going to be successful if people tell you to do something that it's not really in line with what you enjoy eating. So, looking at your overall diet and making sure you can structure it in a way that suits you is the most important thing. And, trying to get a bit of variety of protein. So if you're not coping well with dairy, that's fine. We can find some plant sources there. If you enjoy fish, then you can include the fish and some chicken to just vary it up a bit. And of course, being female, we need to make sure we're getting enough calcium along with that too, because our bones are important as well. And as we get older, that is more and more important. So there's lots of things to consider, but being accountable for yourself and kind of knowing where you're at baseline is the best way to get started, because then you've got some actionable things to work on slowly over time.
Yeah. So actually that kind of led into my next question, was for someone who is just starting to pay attention to their gut health, what are a few simple steps they can take to begin improving their microbiome? I know we've already touched on some of this, but
Yeah. So I have a very strong philosophy for one change at a time. And the reason I do that is because I think too many people will try and tell you to change your whole diet all at once. And let's face it, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable past a couple of days, because we're all busy. And, when the kids are crazy on Wednesday after school, you just fall back into your old habits because you haven't embedded those things into your routines. So I like to help people keep things really achievable and accountable. And by making one small change at a time, the smaller the better, you give yourself more chance at being successful. If you look back in 3 months' time, you might have made 3, 4, 10 changes, and that's your whole lifestyle turned around. So don't underestimate the power of a very small change. And it can start with, firstly, just looking at your diet now. How much fibre are you actually eating? Where's it coming from? If it's all coming from whole grains, then let's add in one piece of fruit a day for you for the next 2 weeks and see how you go with that. Like, that's achievable, right? We can all find time to add an apple in a day if that's our goal for the next couple of weeks. It's easy. It's not changing our meal patterns. We're not taking away things. We're not restricting ourselves. We're just having one more apple. And then you stack on a few things like that, and you can really improve your gut microbiome quite comfortably and in a very healthy way that's not going to disrupt you mentally.
I love that. And I also really like that you are so client led. It's very person centered, and you're just pretty much going from where someone's at, and
Mm.
you're putting their, what is the best way to describe it? Oh my God, my brain is just shutting down.
They have to be the master of their nutrition, right? Like, they have to be the
Yeah.
ones driving, because you're not going to be successful if you're not in the driver's seat and I'm telling you what to do. Then, are you going to achieve it? And, I help people define their why as well. Like, why are you doing this? What is your purpose for doing this? Because and it's not allowed to be anything like losing 5 kilos. Like, that is not allowed in my world. It's like, okay, no, tell me why you want to lose the 5 kilos. Is it to get your cholesterol down? Okay, let's make that your goal and not superficial
I
goal.
love that.
Yeah. So then the weight doesn't matter, and we're focused on the right things, and the weight goes away by itself when our mindset is in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the types of services that you provide. Kind of walk me through that. Like, what would someone expect when they're engaging with your services?
So I'm quite big on the education aspect of what I do, and I love it so much, and I do think that good health and good gut health should be more affordable for people, because let's face it, there's a lot of people out there selling very expensive stuff that is not backed up by science. So I have developed a platform where you can learn all about the gut microbiome and fiber and the mindset side of it, how to track it all stepped out for you, and being part of our community. So you can ask all the questions you want to along the way. Like you said, I'm very focused on helping people make sure they can implement those things into their own lifestyle. So those discussion type boards are very useful. We have coffee catch-ups once a month virtually, so people get to ask their questions live. Yeah, so I have a 6-month special on that at the moment, and I'm sure you can send the link over afterwards.
I sure
But
can.
also offer one-on-one consultations, both of which can be looked at on the website. And also my book, I have a new book coming out soon called Find Peace with Your Gut, Mind and Body, and that will be released in a couple of weeks. So we're nearly there. We're just tweaking the cover at the moment.
Which is so exciting. Actually, before I get to our last question, I want to ask a little bit more about this book. Tell
Yeah.
me what inspired you to start writing this book, and what is it mainly about?
Well, actually, it came about by accident because I was writing out all of the content for my program, which sits inside the app platform which I have. And as I was writing it all out, I was thinking, oh, this might make a good book. And so over Christmas, most of the content was all there, but I rejigged it and made it readable, so it was in a book, like a nice format for a book. So it kind of came about by accident, the book, and it's got to the pointy end now where I'm actually very proud of it, and I can't wait to see it in the flesh when it arrives.
That's so exciting. And is that going to be available like a physical copy? Will it
Yes,
be
yes,
Kindle?
it'll be on all the platforms. I'm working with my publisher at the moment. They'll be organising distribution as well. So depending on where we can sell it, but it will be available on my website, maybe bookstores as well, but we'll see about that.
Amazing. Well, I'll definitely keep everyone posted with that. And who knows, maybe by the time that this is being released, it might be out. So if that's the
Hopefully,
case,
fingers
check
crossed.
the link in the description below. Oh, amazing. Well, to wrap things up, for those who may not have considered the link between gut health and their mental well-being, what would you say to encourage them to take a closer look at how their gut could be affecting their mood and overall mental health?
I would just like to finish off by saying your body is absolutely incredible. And if you could see what it's doing on the inside every time you eat, we would all be inspired to take a little more care of ourselves. And tweaking what you eat can be an absolute game changer in just about every aspect of your life. And I think most people would agree that elevating their health to the next level can really help them get ahead in many ways.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learnt quite a bit more, and I'm excited to connect further and to put your services out there, and maybe I'll even have to book in with you at some point. I'm sure that there's more learning I need.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No worries at all. Thank you so much. See ya.
See ya.